Good, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Possibilities. I'm your host, Danny Hughes, and thank you for joining me here today. Today on the show, I'm gonna talk about a topic that I am extremely interested in, um, and that is accessible travel. And uh, accessible travel is not a topic that I have covered much on the show. I mean, I did a brief I did an interview with All Wheels Up way back when, but it's a topic that I haven't tackled in a long time. So we're gonna um um tackle um that topic today. Um and joining me on the show today we have um Jim McDermott, a, a, a father, um, uh, a father and disability advocate from originally from DC, but I think he's joining us from Las Vegas today. So I'm excited. Um, Jim was on the show before, talking about um uh, his project, uh, care, 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 caretaker. So I'm excited to have him back on the um show, show today. Um, and I'm also gonna be joined by Jeff Preston, a, a professor of accessibility from uh, King's College in um, Hamilton, um, Ontario. So we're, we are gonna tackle. It's gonna be great having Jeff perspective on accessible travel because he is a professor of accessibility. So I'm sure he knows a lot on the topic, and I am so excited about my last guest. Um, my my last guest is gonna be Travis Dhanraj from CBC. Um, now I'm sure a lot of you watching this, um, especially in Canada, are familiar with Travis's work. He's been a reporter for many years, um, for another, for a number of um news outlets, and why I'm why I am getting him on the show today is because he did a fantastic um uh the marketplace investigation on CBC called Access Denied which we will be talking a lot about on the show today. And after the show, I highly recommend that you go and watch it because I believe it's still at the time of this recording, it is still available at QBQ Gym online. You can get it online through the streaming app QBQ Gym. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with those three gentlemen today. So, now this episode might be a bit longer, so I invite you to grab um grab a cup of coffee and join us for this important conversation. So, my guests are not quite here yet, but once they are, we will begin this conversation. So, I will be right back with more of possibilities right after this. And welcome back to Possibilities. Joining me now is Jim McDermott, accessibility advocate from B BC. I believe you're joining us from Vegas, are you, Jim? Uh, and also joining us today are our Jeff Preston, a uh, a, uh, a professor of accessibility accessibility at Queen's University in uh, N- uh, London, Ontario, and also joining us is TVC. Sorry about that, everyone. Um, so joining me, is also Travis Dhanraj from CBC. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all. So welcome everybody.
Thanks for having us, Danny.
Yeah, so thank you. So Travis, I want to start with you because I saw your um I saw your report on access denied, and I'm very curious on how that came about. So can you share that with us first?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that story has had a really profound impact on me, and it's only been we aired it, I think, a couple of months ago. But just the reaction to it has been significant. What it led to in terms of government intervention with Air Canada, for example, has been significant. And really, this was a team effort, but it started, the genesis for the whole thing really started, and I have to give credit to our producer, Jeremy McDonald, who had been looking into the issue of accessibility, accessible transit for a very long time. And he had been getting some emails. At Marketplace, we get a lot of emails, and sometimes it's difficult to sort through what we should be looking at pretty in depth, and what maybe we can hold off on. But he received some tips about maybe you should look at this as an issue. And as we started to dive deeper into the research phase of this, we found out that it is a major problem right across this country when it comes to public transit, when it comes to airlines, when it comes to ride share as well. And we focused on those three areas, but the issue is a lot larger than that. But we wanted to hone in on those three areas because we really thought we could tackle them. And we just really scratched the surface in that episode of Marketplace, but it does show Canadians this issue that so many people in this country face every single day. And it was, as I said, I think about it every day when I'm just, jumping in an Uber, or
Yeah.
getting on the streetcar here in Toronto, or hopping on a plane. And it's very, it's kind of second nature. You don't think about all of the hurdles
Yeah.
that people with accessibility issues face. Now I think about that. And I think that was the goal, with that story, to get the audience, the larger audience, to say, hey, wait a second, like, something needs to be done. Something needs to be done right now about this issue.
Uh, yeah, and we'll get back to that in a minute, Travis. But I want to bring Jeff in because Jeff, you were part of that investigation as well, along with Travis. So what stands out for you as what was the biggest eye opener for you when you look back on that investigation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I want to echo Travis's comments that this was something that had been happening. Filming was happening months and months ago, and the episode airs, back in November, I think late November, and all these months later, I'm still thinking about it, and we're still talking about it. I think one of the things that's really stuck with me is the volume of response that I've received personally. I'm just kind of some guy in some ways. I'm a professor, yes, which makes me kind of easy to find on the internet. But after the first airing of the episode, and now every subsequent episode, I've been getting a surprising number of folks emailing me from Canada who just want someone to hear their story, who just
Yeah.
want someone to listen to the terrible thing that happened to them as they were trying to travel somewhere, whether it be municipally, provincially, or federally. And as somebody with a disability myself, I use an electric wheelchair. These stories are so hard to listen to because they're also my story. And these are the exact same things that I also am experiencing. But I think one of the beautiful things that's come out of it is, as I talk to people, and I've been having phone calls with folks from all over the province, that when I talk about this issue, I think that there's a growing understanding that we're not actually as alone as we think we were.
Yeah.
That we are.
Mhm.
That we actually, there are many of us. We're all having the same experience, and that as we start to gather together and we start to work together, we actually have some power. we have some power to impact things, whether it be having a television program like Marketplace, all the way up to having a minister of transportation actually listen to us and say, I want to do something for Canadians who have not been listened to for a very long time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think about that a lot.
Jim, over you, and what has been your reaction listening to those opening remarks here? Where do you stand on that issue? Yeah.
Thanks, Danny. I'm just nothing lights my fuse faster than hearing stories about people with super expensive power chairs that have been absolutely trashed, having to crawl down an aisle to use the washroom. I've been advocating for people with disabilities for 25 years. I have some practical experience air traveling with my own daughter, who's profoundly brain injured and has a feeding pump, cerebral palsy. She requires more supports than probably the average individual. Just to get her on WestJet to fly her to Vegas in 2018 for a 3-week dream vacation. She hadn't been on an extended holiday in years. I had to fill out a 17-page application with her doctor, and I could have still been rejected for her not getting on an aircraft. But I think my main point is in this conversation, it's 2024. We can
100%.
we can launch average citizens into space, and Danny Steves and my daughter Mariel McDermott can't bring their wheelchair on an aircraft. That's just appalling.
Just do you want to respond to what Jim has just said there? Because I see you nodding and agreeing, so go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the problems is that, we've been building the airline industry since like the 20s, more or less, kind of post World War. We started building this thing called an airline system, and we started to build it, and we continued to expand it, and it grew and it mutated. And all of those decades occurred without anybody really taking seriously the notion that a disabled person might want to be on an airplane too, or might need to be on an airplane. And so, yeah, it's 2024, which means that we have about 100 years of airline history in which no one in the airline industry has taken seriously that disabled people are customers too, and we have a right to fly, that we have a right to get on an airplane without our wheelchairs being destroyed or our bodies being destroyed. So, the best time to have done that, to do this work, would have been back in like the 1930s, but the next best time is today or yesterday or the day before that. Let's start working on this in a really serious way, because enough is enough.
Yeah, agreeing. And I have my own horror stories of when I travel, but I'm sure I'm gonna get into that a little bit later on the conversation here. So, Travis, as a reporter, what when you were doing that investigation, what was the biggest eye opener for you? During that investigation. Yeah.
I think for me, just and to pick up on what Jim and Jeff were saying, is just the sheer volume of stories there are out there like this, right? And really, all of this comes back to accountability. And, really the media, not just the CBC, just the media in general, has a real role to play in this.
Yeah.
And I think, now we are starting to cover this issue more. We're starting to, cover this case by case. But I think, a lot more of that could have been done years ago. So I'm glad that, this story has started, other networks looking at these issues, and it's been covered a bit here and there. But I think really this story put the focus on the issue of accessibility and really on the issue of accountability, because it's incumbent on us to hold the powers that be accountable. And you saw the transport minister, Pablo Rodriguez, and also the minister for inclusion and accessibility. I think that they were really taken aback by this as well, because I don't think that they knew the level to which this was happening. And when you hear stories like Jim's talking about, with people dragging themselves off a plane or being put on a food cart to be taken off a plane, I don't know how you can be a Canadian or anybody watching this story and not think to yourself, something has to change immediately. And these airlines need to be held accountable. And the city of Calgary needs to be held accountable, and cities across the country need to be held accountable for what are, as Jeff, and I were talking about in the story, what seemed to be ableist situations that have been set up when it comes to transit. And I know from doing the story, Uber says it's going to do a better job. The mayor of Calgary told me she's going to look into the transit issues, and Air Canada has said, and the transport minister has said, that they are going to start dealing with this. Now it's up to us as the media to follow through on those stories and make sure that that actually happens and they're accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, do you want to weigh in on what Travis just said?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not here to rip the airline industry a new one. That's already been done. I'm more of, as the inventor of the care changer, I'm more into solutions. And of course, the big one that's come along is the Air for All technology that a consortium of companies in the UK begin putting together. Delta Airlines is a big player in this, from what I've read. And this is finally a solution that the airline industry can no longer say, well, we can't afford to take a seat out and put in tie downs, because if we don't have a wheelchair passenger, we lose a first class ticket. Well, with a seat that folds out of the way, so a wheelchair can be put into place. Apparently, the only obstacle to this thing actually being on an aircraft right now is proper crash testing with the FAA, which I understand is coming along. So fingers crossed that within the next year, we're going to see some innovation in that area.
And as you all know, like Pete Buttigieg in the United States has said he would like to see this happen. And I put that question to our transport minister, and he said, if it's possible, I would like it to happen. So from what Jim is saying, it's possible, right?
Yeah. Yes, I want to bring you on this in on this. What is your reaction when you hear airlines say, "Oh, we're gonna lose money if we're gonna outfit airlines with wheelchair accessibility"?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, in this sort of a dark humor that I enjoy, it's actually kind of refreshing to hear them actually be honest about why they don't want disabled riders on their planes, because they believe that we're cost negative in some way. And that's kind of refreshing, because previously the answer has always been, well, we can't do it. We don't have the technology. It's too complicated. We don't have the training. There are all of these systemic barriers that were raised as the reasons why they couldn't accommodate disabled passengers. And as we know now, and as we've seen for a very long time, all of these technical pieces exist. We have the technology. We can rebuild them, but it's a choice. It's a choice that's being made. And unfortunately, for a very long time, we have allowed not just airlines, corporations in general, organizations, nonprofits, and even governments to use the claim that disabled people are simply too expensive to be included. And it baffles the mind that this is an acceptable excuse, because we would
Yeah.
not allow other protected groups to be said, well, we can't include you because it's simply too expensive.
Yeah.
And the reality is, everything is expensive. You
Yeah.
know, I had a great advocate, I heard them say this years ago and it stuck with me, which they said, everything's expensive. You wouldn't build a bus without wheels, but wheels cost money.
Yep.
Right? If you didn't have wheels on your bus isn't going anywhere. So what do?
Yeah.
You budget for wheels so that the bus goes. Well, accessibility is now a mandatory budget ask.
Yeah.
This is a piece that you need to build in
Yeah.
to all of the budgets that you're building. And it's not an expense that you can skimp out on anymore. This isn't about whether or not you're giving free peanuts to the people in the seats. This is about people's right to access. And I
Yeah.
think that change in thinking is the biggest hurdle that we have to confront right now, is this notion that disabled people are not just lines on a spreadsheet, but
Yeah.
are your moms, your dads, your cousins, your uncles, your brothers or sisters. We're people with rights.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jeff. And if I may, get out of the hosting sheet for a minute and into the wheelchair advocate sheet for a minute. I couldn't agree with you more. Why don't they reduce the budget on other areas that they can and make accessibility more of a priority? Because as Jim pointed out earlier, it is 2024 and the time to act is not now, not in 5 years, not in 10 years now. So I couldn't agree with you more. And Travis, I want to get your opinion on something here. You work with this woman named Alexia for this story. Can you share a little bit about her and what you found out about her?
Yeah, so Alessia Di Virgilio, who is really incredible. Jeremy, our producer, and Jenny as well, they I don't know actually how they connected with Alessia, but they found her regardless, and she was very brave in a lot of ways, and very open, because this whole thing was a process to have cameras follow her, and it's somewhat of an invasive process to have cameras follow you for months, right? But she was up for it because she really wanted to, as annoying as it was to her, and we were always, and it's not only the filming of the story. It's also the contact all the time with the producers and constant following up. She really was very passionate about making sure that the story be told. And so, you know, we were in touch with some other folks who were hesitant to do it. And she said, I'm going to do this because I want people across the country to see the reality of what I go through. We went with her to Prince Edward Island, to Charlottetown.
Yeah.
And Alessia is in a motorized wheelchair. She has a breathing tube, and it is quite the process for her to travel. I had no idea, like even before getting on the plane, how many hurdles you have to jump in order to get approval to get on the plane, right? Like, I have asthma, right? I have breathing issues as well. You can't tell that from looking at me,
No.
but you know, Alessia is in a wheelchair, so you know, her strong feeling on this is that, you know, handing over all of her medical information, handing over all of this personal information about herself to Air Canada simply because she's in a wheelchair is somewhat discriminatory. And you know, I'm not asked for a note from my doctor because I have asthma.
No.
I'm just handed a ticket, right? So all of these issues she faced before even getting on the plane. She had to get approval from her doctor, then from the respirologist. And then the day before we were actually supposed to fly, she got denied and had to get a specialist approval as well. Anyway, that all happened. We got on the plane. There were issues in Toronto and then issues in Charlottetown as well, because something else that I found out is that not every airport in the country, as Jeff and I discussed in the story, have one of these Eagle lifts. And that seems to be a major issue. And that is something that we brought up with Air Canada, with the airport authority, with the minister as well, because that's a really key piece of equipment that airports should have. And then also the other big part of this, which we learned through this process, is training. That it's incumbent upon the airlines, and even when you go to Calgary, you know, we were looking at the buses there, and we went with somebody who has lost his vision, and the audible announcements weren't on, and part of that was because the bus driver didn't turn on the audible announcement in one case. So training really is key here to make sure that if there are accessibility features, that they're actually functioning and they're in place, like the lifts, like the audio signals, etc. So Alessia, I can't say enough about her, but she has been great, and we've actually kept in touch. So yeah, she's wonderful, and actually she might be coming on my new program from time to time as well.
Yeah. Okay. Jim, do you want in on that conversation here?
Well, yeah, sure, Danny. I can. Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I can go back to personal experience, like the one Travis shared about this woman. It's we had the Eagle lift at the Vancouver airport, but there wasn't one, of course, in Victoria, and there wasn't one in Las Vegas. So it was just trying to put her on a chair. She's not that big, so it was a little easier a situation in that regard. But when we got to Vancouver, she had to be changed in a change room that really isn't equipped for someone of adult size. But anyway, we cleared U.S. Customs. By the time we got to the airplane, everybody was waiting for us to load first. Now, we were in the front of the aircraft, and of course, we got some annoying glances from people that were had been waiting, and I thought, this has nothing to do with the frontline people. They were wonderful. The policymakers should be loading everybody else on the aircraft first, since we were in the front seats. we should be on last. It just makes no sense how some of these things take place. Then there's the gentleman, of course, it was a national news story in Victoria, flying WestJet. There was no one to check the battery on his chair. So he was denied on access to that flight merely because no one was there to check the battery and make sure it was safe. To my knowledge, I've never heard of a powered chair battery in a cargo hold catching fire and setting the airplane on fire. Again, this is one of those things, as Jeff was pointing out, they put up these roadblocks. I hate to say it's on purpose, but it sure does gnaw in that direction that they want to discourage people, as Jeff mentioned, from using their service. When Air for All, when they were talking about their solution, was saying this is a market that's going to make them billions. Well, they accommodate people that Danny and my daughter can fly freely. We're right on the airplane. Their ticket sales are going to go up, not down.
Yeah. Jeff, you want to weigh in on what Jim was saying? What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, it definitely can feel at times that some of the measures being taken by the airlines are punitive in nature, that essentially advocates are being punished for asking questions and for demanding access, and therefore they're putting on these roadblocks to say, oh, okay, so you're gonna come on, well, we're gonna need medical checks. We're gonna need to verify now all of the information about whether or not you are able to travel. We're gonna need to verify this information, so it can feel very punitive in some ways. But I think there's another part of this story that's really important for us to think about, which is that airlines are extremely siloed organizations and very fragmented. And so one of the problems that I've encountered in dealing with airlines is that the corporate offices, so if you call Air Canada, if you call WestJet, Delta, United, any of the big guys, and you ask them about their accessibility policies or their accommodation policies, they will roll out to you how they have these wonderful plans. They have these great training modules, they have these great policies, they have everything lined up. And at the corporate level, in many cases, they do have all these things in place. The problem is that very little of an airline's operations are done by the airline themselves. There's so much subcontracting happening within this industry in which it's one company that's dealing with the baggage, it's another company that's dealing with the front line, it's another group entirely that might even be serving the plane through things that they call the Star Alliance, in which airlines are able to swap around stewardesses and pilots. And so what happens is you have a bunch of organizations that have a bunch of rules and regulations, but do they actually translate down into the providers that are executing the on-the-ground activities? My experience, the answer is no, definitely not. And that's what we saw in the famous Las Vegas incident, where an individual had to drag himself off. The explanation from the airline was, well, it's not our fault. We hired another company and that company blew it. And that's true.
Travis, you want in on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, all I was going to say to the points Jeff makes is that there does seem to be this kind of like game of like, I don't know if you've seen that meme where everybody's pointing at one another, your fault, your fault, your fault. But it seems to be that kind of haze of accountability. We're like, when the lifts, for example, okay, well, there's the airport authority involved, there's the airlines involved, there's this, and so even just for us as journalists, usually there's a clear cut, there's a clear like line between this problem and this is who's accountable for it. It seems to be completely muddled. And so what happens is exactly what Jeff says, is that you'll have the airline pointing at an outside contractor who will then say, well, it's the airport authority's issue or what have you. And so I think also what needs to happen is that there needs to be like maybe even like an overarching body which actually looks at kind of this stuff and looks as to where the accountability is, because right now it's diffused in many ways, right? And so that's why all of these issues are kind of falling through the cracks.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Before we go any further, I did get a statement from the CEO of All Wheels Up in preparation for this story, and for those of you who aren't familiar, All Wheels Up is a company who is trying to outfit airlines with accessible travel. So, Travis, would you mind reading out what they said on that matter, please?
Absolutely. Do you want me to read the whole email?
Yes.
Okay. So All Wheels Up continues to work toward accessible air travel. In 2023, AWU worked to have specific language added to the 2023 FAA reauthorization that would continue to push for funding and research for a wheelchair spot on planes. Training, AWU asked for harmonized training through the occupational therapy lens, as well as this accredited certificate. I'm going to pick these up for a second. Accredited certificate. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Sorry, my producer just walked in.
We lost you.
Now you're gone.
Now you're going, Travis.
Sorry, Travis.
I don't know if you
Yes.
can hear us either.
Yes. Do you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. So the AWU lays out 4 things that they are working on with the reauthorization. Number 1, training. The AWU asks for harmonized training through the occupational therapy lens, as well as making this an accredited and certified-based program. Number 2, they ask for the Center of Excellence for Accessible Air Travel to be created, which would provide a 10-year sustainable source of funding for research surrounding all disabilities. Number 3, for evacuations, they're asking that the FAA reinvestigate evacuations with persons with disabilities in mind. All Wheels Up wants specific tools and resources on board to safely evacuate people with disabilities during air incidents. And number 4, they would like an economic impact study. They go on to say that our small grassroots organization were able to have all of this added to the 2023 FAA reauthorization. While some of the language is not exactly what they had in mind, it is great progress, and that currently the 2023 FAA reauthorization has been delayed, but they do expect it to be passed by March. Till then, they will continue with Hill's visits to push their agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff and Travis. So, Jeff, can we get your opinion on that, please?
Yeah. I think these are all really important recommendations. I like the fact that they're tackling both the active, let's get people on airplanes, while also thinking about what do we do in the case of an emergency. That's not a question I've had myself. I have no idea what would happen. I guess I would probably just die if there was a problem with the airplane. I think that's maybe what would happen. Every man for themselves. But I think these are all great moves. And it's great that this is going to the FAA because as an American corporation or an association, this can have real ramifications in North America for airline travel, since all of the Canadian operators operate in the States as well. Most of them do. The problem is I would love to see this brought over to Canada the Canadian authorities should also be implementing these same types of things in parallel with the FAA, because there is a real risk, as we have seen with things like the one passenger, one fare, where the airline, because they're only required to provide attendant care free tickets in Canada, they simply then do not do it for flights outside of Canada. So I think that these jurisdictional lines can become a problem where the benefits that happen in America might not translate directly to Canada.
Travis, you have to go now.
I do. Yeah, sorry guys. There's a story breaking on Global Affairs Canada that I have to run out. It's some massive data breach. So my producer just stepped in and said, "You gotta come out here."
Well, thank you for coming on today. And there was another question I have for you, but I understand that you have to go. So
I can answer it. I can answer it quick. And then I can hopefully we do this again at some point.
yeah, thank you. I know that your colleague actually spoke with a member of Air Canada's staff, and he said for those passengers who we may have let down, we are truly sorry. So what do you make of that apology, first of all, Travis?
I mean, the whole communications with Air Canada was interesting. I will say this, and I'll say, you know, they spoke to Ashley and did tell her that, but they also said that, you know, the large majority of you know, passengers don't have issues, and that this was these were isolated matters, and they apologize, and they're going to continue to do better. We had been trying as our marketplace team, for weeks and weeks to sit down with Air Canada for a long form interview with the president, CEO, with any vice president, with anybody at Air Canada, as opposed to just like a spokesperson, a PR person, to talk about this in depth. And they refused. We actually went to Air Canada's offices in Toronto and said, "We're here. Can somebody come down?" And we just got, you know, just paper. And then they did that interview with Ashley, which was great, and we're so thankful to Ashley for getting some accountability there. But they didn't agree to do like a very long form interview with us on all of the specifics, right? Of the issues. And I think, you know, that would be useful if Air Canada didn't hide behind, you know, PR folks. That the decision makers actually sat down to answer some of these questions about the specifics around these cases. Now, the other thing that Air Canada told us when it came to Alessia was that it's customer confidentiality. And we told Air Canada that Alessia had said she is fine with the company talking to us about the specifics of her case. And of course, they didn't agree to do that. But I think it is incumbent upon Air Canada, upon other airlines, when these incidents do happen, to have some level of transparency. Because that's not happening right now. And that is why, you know, we'll just get sorry, we'll try to do better, right? And I mean, and also the other thing is they've told the Minister of Transportation that they are going to do better. It's also incumbent upon this government to follow through and make sure that the airline does what it says that it's going to do.
Yes.
Well,
And also part of this as well is on the CTA. I mean, again, we get into the accountability issue, and that there's so many different aspects to this, right? The Canadian Transportation Agency has a large role to play as well, and that's kind of arm's length from the transport minister. It's CTA's responsibility to find these airlines, and so if you're finding a company like Air Canada or WestJet, a couple of $100,000, that's not a lot of money for a big airline,
Yeah.
right? So what
Yeah.
we have experts tell us is that they'll just pay the fine, right? Until major fines are given. And Jeff, I think we were having this conversation, right? Until major fines were given, you may not see progress as quickly as you would like when it comes to these issues.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I know that you will. I know that you will definitely follow this story with on Canada tonight. So keep up the great work, Travis, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, so
good stuff, guys. Thank you. And Danny, keep up the good work as well. And Jim and Jeff, nice to see all of you. I'm sorry I got to step out, but that's news, and Danny, let me know whenever you're doing this again, and I'm happy to pop back anytime.
good luck. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Like,
Cheers.
so yes, I wonder if you would fill in for Travis on kind of and give your evaluation of what was just said. Yeah.
Yeah, I really want to underline what Travis said around fines and around this sort of question of cost of doing business. And I think that airlines approach accessibility, or more specifically, they approach service delivery errors or gaps in their accessibility through this legalistic lens, right? So the lawyers get involved and they shut everything down. And they say, we're not going to talk about it, we're not going to do anything, and we're going to end up in this sort of world of legal mumbo jumbo. And I think that often airlines, and I'm going to use this in a very broad sense, I don't just mean Canadian airlines, all of them, tend to use their legal might and their financial might as a means to obfuscate, to slow down, and to make it more expensive for people to fight for their rights than it is necessarily worth it for a lot of people. So people might lawyer up and they might contact the airline. And then what you get is what I refer to as legal flack, which is, to use an airline term, where they just shoot a bunch of crap out into the sky and hope that your plane runs into it and it brings you down. And so they start throwing up questions around jurisdiction. They'll say, oh no, you filed this in the provincial court. Well, the provincial court doesn't have jurisdiction here. This is a federal matter, so we're not going to talk about it. Or, oh, well, you're talking about a baggage issue. That's a third-party vendor, so that has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you're talking about an international flight, so we don't think Canada is the jurisdiction for this. We think this is actually an American thing, so we're not going to respond to this.
Yeah.
And so what happens is they start to obfuscate the pathway. And for a lot of folks, they don't necessarily have the legal training, they don't necessarily have the advocate training, or they don't have the educational background to research the actual truth to it. And so what we know is that a lot of disabled people have experienced violations of their right on airlines, and they do not proceed with any sort of grievance, but for a variety of reasons. Some of them being they don't know how, they don't have the background to do it, or they don't have the financial resources to actually take on the airline. And that's where the transportation agency, the CTA, needs to play the role of arbiter. Because the CTA have a budget that an average citizen does not. They have the weight of the Ontario or the Canadian government behind them. The problem is that for a very long time, the CTA, it is felt, has been more on the side of the airlines than on the average consumer. And so it hasn't been a place of justice until quite recently for disabled people. And until that changes, we're likely not going to see improvements.
Yeah. Jim, I want your opinion on what Travis, what Jeff has just said. And then I have another question for you, Jeff, and then we'll go from there. So, Jim, go ahead.
Sure, thanks. Just to circle back to what they talked about earlier, I believe there was one news story where the president of Air Canada did come on to make probably one of the most disingenuous apologies I've heard in a long time. Yeah, meant absolutely nothing. And to kick it back even further to talk about All Wheels Up, they're a terrific advocacy organization. They've been around for more than a decade, actually, lobbying Congress. And I see the Americans as the leadership in this because the Americans with Disabilities Act, somewhere along the way, they're either going to, through Congress, put something in there to make pressure on the airlines to move forward with solutions and better accommodation and accessibility for people that require mobility devices to get around. Short of that, to comment further on Jeff's with individuals taking legal action against it, I'm smelling a class action lawsuit somewhere down the way where a good guy lawyer is going to ride into town, or a good girl lawyer is going to ride into town, pick this up and initiate a class action litigation involving multiple people and millions of dollars, and that's where you get people's attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to circle back with what I was talking to Travis about just before he had to get out with regards to that Air Canada executive talking to Ashley. What do you make of his comments where he says, for those of our customers who we may have let down, we are truly sorry. What do you make of those comments?
Yeah, I think I'm with Jim on this one. It kind of reminds me of a South Park episode in which the corporations are constantly, destroying the environment, and it's an oil company is polluting the world, and every time something terrible happens, the exec gets on and says, "We're sorry. We're so sorry." The problem with sorry, while it's appreciated, I suppose, the problem is that sorry has been the thing that we've heard for decades.
Yeah.
Airline travelers with disabilities have heard how sorry the airline is. But the problem with apologies is that they just don't mean anything if you don't learn from it. If I step on your foot and I say I'm sorry, that apology only means something if I don't step on your foot anymore. And the airline continues to step on our feet. After the production with CBC, I had a flight with Air Canada and my wheelchair was damaged. So I'm not so sure how sorry they were if literal months after they say, not weeks after this statement, they're continuing to do the same thing. And so I would reply to the CEO of Air Canada and say, if you were legitimately sorry, if you are genuinely sorry to the people that you have physically and emotionally hurt in this process, then you will actually ensure that this doesn't happen again. And until that happens, I do not accept your apology.
So, bang on, Jeff, and I just want to go back to the wording that he used. He didn't say he didn't say, oh, we apologize, we are truly sorry. He said we may have let down our customers. So, well, to that I say totally total BS, because that is it's not a question of may we have let down. You did let them down. So, what's your opinion on that, Jeff or Jim? I'll open up the floor here.
Well, yeah, I agree with Jeff and his comments. But Danny, I wanted to maybe spend a little time hearing your personal story about air travel, if you could. I know we got some time left.
Yeah.
I'd really like to hear your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was hoping Travis would be here for this, but I understand he's a busy guy. But I um uh I don't have very much good to say about Air Canada. They are um not to throw anyone under the bus here, but that is basically my job, so I'm gonna do it. And just say, Air Canada, you should be ashamed of yourself, because you don't know how to work with people with disabilities at all. You're just doing lip service as far as I'm concerned, and you just need to stop that and own up to your mistakes. Yeah, and I'll tell you why I say that, and I don't let you respond to that. About in 20, in 2019 or late 2018, I guess, I took an airline flight, and it was Air Canada, because we couldn't get a Southwest air flight, which those are much better for me and for wheelchair users. Southwest is an awesome airline, I will say, and but Air Canada is not. And first of all, they they put me in they put me in one of the aisle chairs, and I'm sure you can you know what I'm talking about just when I say aisle chair, because I'm sure you travel a lot, and they proceeded to put me in the aisle chair, and they didn't have a lift at all, so my they had to manhandle me to put me on the aisle chair, and then they they couldn't they didn't know how to put they didn't know how to put the seatbelt on me, so I was literally falling out of the aisle chair, and they my dad had to step in and say, "Oh, that's just how you do it, guys." They didn't even know how to do it, and it was their job to know how to do it. So, what's your opinion on that, Jeff?
Yeah, I think this gets back to Travis's point on training, that there really aren't. There's just nowhere near enough training on how to manage people and how to communicate with people, to talk to them about their needs, and to get information from one point to another. Right. So you're talking about entering into the airline or into the airport. They know you're coming. You know, we have to fill in all this documentation. They know you're coming. The number of times that I've submitted the dimensions of my wheelchair to the airline and then arrived at the airport for them to say, we need the dimensions of your wheelchair, is shocking. I don't know how. It's called an email, folks. Send it. It's that easy. I do it every day. And so do you, I would assume. But what you're
Yeah.
referring to here is a one size fits all plan that airlines have tried to implement, which is a fundamental misunderstanding of disability. People assume that there is one methodology for all disabled people. And the reality is that disabled people are just as diverse as everyone else in the world. There's a great phrase that I like to steal from my friends in the autistic community
Yeah.
who say, if you've met a person with autism, you now know one person with autism.
Yeah.
And I think that this sort of applies to all of disability, in that, you know, people within the same disabled category can have radically different needs. Even people with the same diagnosis can have extremely different needs, because all of our bodies and minds function differently and
Yeah.
have different impacts based on the diagnosis. There is no one size fits all.
Well,
And so, you know, you referred to the aisle chair. I'm probably one of the only people, or one of the few people in the world, that the aisle chair actually kind of fits. But it's because I'm a small dude. I think it's like they were like, okay, let's make a chair for Jeff, and then they wonder why it doesn't work for anybody else, because of course it wouldn't. And
no.
so we have to think a little bit more about not just a one size and a one way, but about
Yeah.
flexible development.
And I will say that the the people in Canada need to do a much better job at training those people to help people with disabilities, and not just have them in red suit jackets that look pretty. They actually need to do their job. So, that's my opinion on that. So, I and yes, I was really hoping to get Travis in on this topic again, but again, I understand. What was your reaction when the list hit her head, on the head, and she got she got she got injured from that? What was your reaction? Because I know you were watching with Travis as that was all going down. So what was your reaction when I hit her on the head?
Yeah. So before I'd gone into the studio to do the interview, they told me that they were going to show me some footage, and they told me that it was pretty bad, and just to prepare myself for it.
Yeah.
And which is fair enough. I appreciate that they do that. But you know, being who I am, I'm like, oh, how bad could it be? I've seen everything. You know, I was like, do your worst, Air Canada. And I saw their worst. It was very hard to watch, extremely hard to watch, because this is a person, and like I'm thinking about what would have been going through my head. You know, you're about to get on an airplane, you're about to go on a trip, and most people's minds as they're going through the airport. I mean, you have lots of anxiety going through the airport just to begin with, whether or not you have a disability, right? It's an anxious place to be. But what most people are thinking about by the time they get to the gate of the plane is, I've made it, I'm getting on the plane, and my vacation's about to start, right? And here you have an individual who now has to wonder, are they even going to get me on this plane safely? And
Yeah.
then it happens, and it's like, nope, well, now I have to replan everything, right? Like, imagine if she had had a concussion and you've spent all of your time and money planning for this trip away, and now you're unable to do anything because you were concussed as they were trying to transfer you. And so,
Yeah.
you know, you look at that video, and the thing that really was going through my head was, that could be me. That could be you, Danny. That could be any of us at any moment, because this is
Yeah.
not an isolated incident. It is not a one time oops. This is an experience that a lot of people have
And
had and will continue to have. And that's horrifying.
and it wasn't even oops. It was an extremely bad incident. I was like, when I was watching the interview, when I was watching that footage, I was like, oh my word, what are you doing here? Like, is that the best you can? Is that the best you can do? I think not. So Jim, I your reaction to what your reaction to what Jeff and I was just talking about, please.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I didn't see that story for just that reason. I get a little emotional when I see stuff like that go down. But I want to, it's appalling. Well, Air Canada might be the biggest carrier and likely the biggest villain in this country. Just like Travis, when he went to Air Canada and said, I'd like to talk to you, I'd like to do, I did the same thing with WestJet. I wrote them to the special services email line and their media relations people saying that I'm going to be on the Danny Steve show. This is what we're going to talk about. here's my feeling on, well, my experience with WestJet flying my daughter. There were some positive aspects to it, but there were some negative ones as well that need to be addressed. Well, I got ghosted just like Travis did. So yeah, so WestJet that needs to be called on the carpet over here too. They're a major carrier in the country, and they also need to do better.
Yeah. And yeah, just wrapping up shortly here, but a few more topics to go over. What is the biggest issue when it comes to accessibility on airplanes?
Yeah, that's that. Oh man, it is really hard to narrow it down to what the biggest one is. I mean, from a very like a deeply personal perspective, and I don't want to take up all the air on wheelchair stuff because I'm a wheelchair user, and wheelchair users tend to do that. We just make them all for wheelchairs. But I think the treatment of adaptive devices, whether it be wheelchairs, walkers, other medical equipment, there needs to be a change in airline philosophy to not see these as luggage, because it is thought of like baggage and not thought of as important medical equipment that people's lives depend on. I think that fundamentally needs to change. I think the other thing that we need to really start to think about that we haven't spent really a lot of time thinking about and talking about is access for neurodivergent people as they're walking through airplanes and going through airline processes, whether it be the check-in system, whether it be the security system, whether it be on the airplanes themselves. I think that that is probably the next frontier in terms of accessible travel, is thinking about how the current airline system is inaccessible to some people that are neurodivergent. And I think that might be something that we need to spend a little bit more time thinking about.
Yeah, and what would that look like in your mind, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that part of it is about training. I think that there needs to be better training and understanding for frontline people, whether it be people at the TSA, security, or even people at the front desk, about how to interact with people that might be different, that might have different ways of interacting and different ways of talking to, communicating, asking questions of, or answering questions. I really worry that a lot of folks are falling into, particularly the security apparatus, where they might end up being criminalized essentially because of their different way of functioning. That isn't appropriate. That isn't fair. It's not right. It's unjust. And so I think having a better understanding that different people have different needs, particularly when you start thinking about sensory stuff. It is a very high sensory environment within airports, and then you put in the anxiety of travel, and then you put in the very sort of authoritative method of security processing with touching and things like that, pat downs. I think that we could do a much better job of both preparing people, but also working them through the system in a way that ensures safety, but also doesn't trigger people, because neurodivergent people have a right to fly too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I know we're not done talking about this story, so maybe we'll have you maybe we'll have you come back in a later episode and talk about it some more, but for right now, both of you, what would be your final message to Air Canada and and um everyone watching today. Jess, I'll begin with you and then Jim.
Sure. So, without going on too big of a tangent, I think that often when we approach accessibility and disability rights and disability needs in general, I find that often people have this like emotional collapse that they look at it and they start thinking, this seems like a lot of work. This seems very complicated. I don't want to be wrong. The stakes seem really high. And the solution is to just ignore it. Just like it's the boogeyman in the closet. Let's just ignore it. And this seems to be a way that we often encounter disability is one of anxiety, one of fear, one of confusion, and really a sense that we don't know what to do, and therefore we won't do anything. That's the only option we have in front of us. And I want to share, I would say, with airlines and everyone listening, that that actually isn't the case. That once you step past that initial reaction of anxiety to change or fear of difference, that once you actually start to think about solutions and opportunity that is presented by disability, you actually are going to find that integrating disabled people into our systems is not just a morally correct thing to do, not just a legally correct or right thing to do, a just thing to do, but that disabled people entering into spaces and being accommodated tends to improve those spaces for everybody because we all are humans with diverse needs. And so the more that we're thinking about universal design and thinking about universalizing human need and not standardizing or normalizing human need, the better for all of us as humans. And so I ask you, step back from that fear, step back from that anxiety, step back from what appears to be a monumental, insurmountable task, and embrace the reality that not only is this possible, but actually it's good.
Well said, Jeff, and uh, I was gonna end it there, but I forgot to mention one thing. The and you bring up a really good point, Jeff, because sooner than later, everyone will have a disability. It's just a matter of time. And to quote my disability, to quote my colleague, Dr. Peter Rosenbaum, he says, we all have a disability. We just some some people just look different than other people. So I just want to point that out because disability is public in all shapes and sizes. So and um and sorry, I just thought of another question for you, Jeff, before we close here. And then Jim, I'll get your final thoughts in a minute here, but what when Travis was interviewing the minister of Minister Rodrigo, and he said Travis point blank asked him, "Do you think it's time? Do you think it's time for air airlines to have a accessible spot on airplanes, and he just said, quote, quote, if it is possible, yes. So, Jeff, what do you say to the Minister Rodrigo?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting political answer because it appears as though it provides an out, but in fact there isn't an out. He actually kind of answers his own question. If it's possible, yes, it is possible. So your answer, Minister, is yes. So now what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying before, just those people in power are really in the habit of saying, no, it's not possible to do something when it is. And we need to, it's time to stop pussyfooting around, and you and I and Jim can join us if he wants, but you and I just need to start holding people accountable for their actions before any more damage gets done here. So, Jim, your thoughts on that topic, please?
Sure. Thanks, Danny. I don't think I can add too much more to what Jeff said. He's covered it all from disability, diversity, and making it accessible for people with autism, right on down to people with like my daughter who have high needs and are confined to a wheelchair and need a lot of extra supports. I like to stay positive on all things, having created an assistive technology to help people that are wheelchair users, incontinent, and unable to articulate their needs. I really do see the future with you and with Jeff and Danny being able to bring their wheelchairs one day, and I'm hoping it happens soon, right on the aircraft, lock it down, and enjoy your flight, gentlemen.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jim, and hopefully that is coming in the near future. Okay, thank you, Jim and Jeff, for joining me here today, and I'm sure we won't have, this won't be our last conversation. So thank you very much for joining me here today.
My pleasure, Danny. As I said earlier, you're an inspiration to all of us, and certainly one of my favorite talk show hosts.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks so much for having us.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and we will be right back with more possible. We will be right back with more possibilities in a moment. Stay tuned. And welcome back once again to possibilities. Wow, that was a great conversation. I uh once again I would like to thank my guest, uh Travis Dhanraj and Jeff Preston and Jim McDermott. So I know Travis wasn't with us for very long, but I'm glad he was able to join us. So, like I said on the show, um, we are far from done. The, uh, we are far from done on this topic of accessible travel. So we are gonna stay on top of it here on possibilities and yeah, um, I know Travis and Team at CBC and his new program, Canada Tonight, will also communicate. So, thank you very much for joining me here today. And if you want to get in touch with me, my email address is possibilityshow@gmail.com. Again, that is possibilityshow@gmail.com. So until next time, keep the guest out of disability and for all of us here at Possibilities, we'll see you next time. Bye for now.